This one's for any small business owner who is frustrated with their current software system because it feels like they need 12 different logins and to go to 3 different places in order to do the core functions of their small business, which just doesn't feel that complicated to them. If that sounds like you, in this video, I'm going to talk about the biggest mistakes I see established small business owners make as they're thinking about the evolution of their software stack. And if you're new to small business, don't worry. I've got some thoughts here too for somebody who is setting up their software stack for their small business for the first time. If we haven't met, I'm Samantha. I'm an operations consultant for small businesses and the founder of Exhale Operations, which helps small business owners to improve and refine their systems so that they can get more time back to do the work they actually enjoy. I wanted to talk about this today because I think most people, when they decide to start a business, are not like excited about the tech side. They aren't excited about figuring out which software they're going to use to send their emails and who's going to manage their checkout and how do those two things connect and where do they send their contracts from, and is that the same place as the invoices, and what is an MCP server and an API, and do they need to know those acronyms in order to be successful? And if all of that just made you sweat a little bit, I have realized over the years that I am in the minority in finding all this stuff fun, which is maybe why I started an operations consulting business for small businesses. But I want you to know you don't have to become an expert at all of this in order to have a successful business. What you do need to do is make sure that you're thinking about this process the right way so that you don't wake up in 6 months and realize you've been paying subscriptions for 3 softwares that you only use for 1 feature when that money could have been going to far better places. So before we go any further, let's take a step back and talk about where most business owners go wrong. And that tends to start when they realize they have a problem. If you are in the day-to-day running your business and you're frustrated with one or more of the software tools that you use, this could be your email provider, your website provider, your contract, your invoice, your payments, analytics tracking, your social media posting. For every small business, there are different systems that you use, and this process normally starts when you get frustrated with one or more of them. Now, one of the most dangerous ways this happens is because you see some seemingly helpful piece of content on the internet about how some other small business owner runs their business, and you get FOMO of, oh, my systems don't do that, or I don't have that set up. And you start thinking to yourself, oh, maybe it's the tool that I'm using and maybe I'd be better off on another tool. Then you start daydreaming that, oh, when I'm on this other tool that has all these features, my business will explode, these things will happen automatically, I'll make money when I sleep. Don't get me wrong, I do think some of those things are very possible, but small business owner tends to put a lot of weight on, oh, if I fix the tool, then everything will change. And before we go any further in this video, I have to dispel that myth because tools are only as good as when you use them. Now, one of the things that keeps us from using them is if a tool is not user-friendly, if it doesn't integrate with other existing tools, then it's going to be harder and harder for you to use the tool. And you're going to be more and more likely to do things manually or the messy way and then not take full advantage of this tool that in most cases you're paying for. But so at this moment where you're frustrated, you realize your system isn't working the best you can. The typical thing that I hear that small business owners do, and I have been guilty in my prior business, is you then start browsing. You Google best email service provider or best website host, and you open a bunch of tabs for all the different options, and you scroll through the homepage, you click to the pricing page, you scroll through, and you see all these lovely checkboxes and X's of the features that come at the different levels. At this point, whether you realize it or not, there is normally enormous information overload, and you are incredibly susceptible to marketing. One of the things that these programs, which like credit to them, this is part of how they've been successful as businesses, is they are really good at their particular way of packaging tools and services. It can be easy to get marketed to with your 12 tabs open and end up making a decision that has you looking at your monthly bills at the end of every month going, wait, how did my software costs get so high? So in this video, I want to talk through how I recommend that a small business owner thinks about making a software change. This can be switching from one tool to another, it can be consolidating all in one tool, or it can be establishing sort of a specialist tool, adding to your stack. But whichever scenario we're talking about, I'm going to explain to you the recommendation of how I would advise a client to go through this process so that you don't end up 6 months from now regretting the transition, and worst case scenario so that you don't spend a week of your time transitioning from your existing tool to your new tool only to realize, oh, this has its own different problems and now I'm just in a tool that I'm not as familiar with. The first step you got to take if you realize that it's time to transition, consolidate, or add a software tool is you need to have what I call a job description for your tool. This is the part that most small business owners jump over and they go straight to browsing. And then because they're so not clear on the job description that they have for their tool, they can get wooed by all sorts of marketing. So in this scenario, we have to take a step back, step away from the tools, and ask, what is the function that I need this tool to solve that my existing situation is not solving? Get clear about the actual thing you need it to do. Is it that you need a contract to be able to customize the pricing line rather than having the same number go out every time or having to manually switch it? Whatever your specific situation is, get very clear on what it is that you are missing from your existing tool or what you would like to be able to do. In this process, it's useful to think a little broader about what are the things that you use your existing tool for. Write down all the things that you love and depend on it for. And if there are any nice to haves, you would love to be able to collect this information and automatically pass it here. You'd love to be able to connect to Zapier with this tool because that could integrate with your content creation system. Great, write those all down. And then this is a moment to be in CEO brain, to really step back and say, what of this are my must-haves? What are my needs? And what are my, that's nice to have. If it doesn't work that way, I'd be just fine. The reason this is so important is because it prevents you from shiny tool syndrome when you're going through some website and start dreaming of all the possible things you could do and get distracted from the very practical today things that you need this new tool to do. Now, if you're a small business owner, you may be enormously overwhelmed by that question. Honestly, maybe for established business owners too, because you may not have ever stepped back and thought about what are the actual functions that you need your software stack to solve for you. And I guess it should be said, you can really narrow this down if you're only talking about your email provider, for example. If you're trying to think about your whole stack, this is a hefty exercise. So make sure you give yourself time to really think through it and do the homework necessary. And obviously, if you want somebody to guide you through this process, my website is linked in the description down below. So if you're a new business owner and you are very overwhelmed by this question, the easiest way to think through this process is to evaluate the 4 core foundational pillars of any business: marketing, sales, finance, and operations. So you need to think, and if you don't have this answer, honestly, this is a bigger strategy question, which good for you. You'll get 2 birds with 1 stone by doing this thinking right now. You need to establish what is your core strategy for each of these 4 systems. Every business owner needs to have their core strategy for marketing. How do you get in front of people that don't know you? I would highly not recommend, as a new business owner, to have 5 different ways that you get in front of new potential clients. It's real easy to say, oh, I'm going to be on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and Pinterest, and I'm going to do email marketing. Let me tell you, as somebody who is now in their second small business, trying to do too many things means you will not get anything done well. So what is your core way that you are going to get in front of new potential businesses? And when you get in front of them, how are you going to get them interested in your product? Is that still happening on that same place? Or are you trying to take them to somewhere else in order to woo them to consider your business, service, or product? What's your one strategy? And then with that one strategy, you can evaluate what tools do you need in order to do that successfully. Now, sales. When somebody expresses interest in your business's service or product, how do you convert them from interested client into paying client? What tools or systems? Is that email marketing? Is that a contract? Is that a checkout page? What functionalities do you need to get them from point A to point B? Finance. What is the core way that you capture revenue, track revenue, capture expenses, track expenses, and evaluate where the money is going in your business? For some people, this is a accounting software. For some people, this is a professional bookkeeper. For some people, this is a Google Sheets where they just are very diligent about bookkeeping for themselves. How are you going to manage those? And what are the core functionalities you need in order to get that done? And then finally, operations, which can be the most far-reaching. This generally needs to cover how you get the behind the scenes of your business done and how you service your clients in terms of services, or if you're a product-based business, how do you get that product produced and out the door? What are the core functions of those processes? Those 4, and don't overcomplicate it. Don't try to add 17 different integrations. Your one core strategy for each of those 4 products. What functionalities do you need to do in order to do that successfully? Then write your job description, and then it's time to move on to the next step. Once we have our job description, before we go into the search stage, we need to do one more really good gut check. And this is one of those things that comes down to more of your mindset as a business owner than the practical, tactical things going on. You need to optimize your business for today and maybe the next 6 months. Now, do I want you picking and onboarding a software tool that you're going to have to transition off of in 6 months? No, I definitely don't want you to do that. But picking a tool for what you can do when you are a $1 million business owner, when you're still trying to crack 500K or even 100K, is signing yourself up to pay inflated prices for a bunch of functionalities that you won't use. So make sure when you've now written out this nice job description that when you look at that middle section, that needs list, you're very honest. Is this a need or is this a want? And make sure that those are qualified appropriately. Must-haves are your must-haves. And those typically are the most basic things. It needs to be able to send emails on a schedule. It needs to be able to send emails by sequence, like a user trigger. It needs to be able to capture user information to add themselves to the email software automatically. Those tend to be the must-haves. Then once we get into the needs, it should be a similarly somewhat narrow list, but just we have to gut check this because I've seen too many lists where the needs are enormously long and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, this is going to be quite a research adventure to find this. If you are a new business owner, it's going to be hard to know the real answers to this. So I would just caution yourself to be conservative in what you put in the needs list versus what you put in the wants list. But now, with our refined and edited job description, we finally get to where most people started this process, which is pulling up those tabs of all the potential software tools that you could use. Once you have a job description, all that comparison shopping gets a whole lot more focused. You are opening a website page for that email service provider, that website host, that contract tool, and you are checking that tool against your job description. I like to have a little database built out in my Notion where I can have checkboxes and write little notes about how the different softwares compare. So I can get very clear on, do they check all of the must-have boxes, how many of the needs, and how many of the wants do each of these tools have. I recommend when you're doing this, if there are different pricing levels, that you just basically make a different line for each pricing level. So you're evaluating the free plan and then the pro plan and then the enterprise plan or whatever it is, because in the functionality, sometimes those can almost feel like different systems in total. The things that a lot of small business owners miss in this process is the fine print. I'm always cautioning clients, think about integrations, automations, and migrations. It's the shuns that are important here. Integrations are things like if you rely on Zapier for a lot of interconnections between your business, at what pricing level does the Zapier integration kick in? When you look at their compatible tools, sometimes software systems will have like a whole bunch of logos and you'll be like, oh, well, there's so many logos there. Obviously it must integrate with my contract provider. Double check yourself, because you'd be surprised how many times you get screwed signing up for a new platform and then go, God, really? It's not included? So that's integrations. Automations, make sure you're paying attention to what things can happen automatically versus need to be done manually. And this especially matters when you're thinking about integrations. So what information can automatically be passed from one tool to another? What information capture can happen easily? Also pay attention to whether implementing some sort of automation like an automatic email capture or triggering something requires using code or CSS that in some other tool you may not be paying for. So common example of this is if embedding a opt-in email capture widget into your website requires a coding level that you're not currently paying for in your website. And then finally, migrations. If you are using an existing tool for your email service, you may have thousands of pieces of user data, not to mention all your standard sequences that you have set up. And those that offer migration from one tool to the other can save you weeks of work. Not having a migration service does not mean that you shouldn't choose the tool that you're thinking about. It's just something to pay attention to. So you review all your various options. You take your notes on how it compares against your must-haves, your needs, and your wants. And then we get to take a step back and ask which one of those really sexy tools that sounded so amazing are missing multiple of your must-have functionalities. And then you can promptly close that tab. When it comes to new business owners, this is a big reminder where all those aspirational things you want to build can steer you really wrong. If you get too focused on what that big creator who you saw who has 1 million followers is doing, they are at a different level of business than you. Make sure your eyes are not bigger than your mouth when it comes to these software tools. These are going to be the dollars that are going out the door every month that you are going to be comparing against the dollars that you've brought in. And in those early months and years of business, every dollar counts. Before we make any decisions with what I'm sure are incredibly detailed notes. I want to make you aware of 3 very common traps that even somebody who does this reviewing on behalf of my clients can sometimes have to catch myself in, shake me out of my hypnosis, that can steer you in the direction of a tool that may be either not the right fit or more expensive than you need. The first trap is the all-in-one trap. There are lots of tools that sort of pitch this amazing, comprehensive, you have blah, blah, blah features all available to you. And especially for those business owners who are dreaming big about the business that they're going to build, they can be incredibly wooed by, oh, how convenient it'll be that when I'm ready to add that, it'll just already be included. I remember when I was running a coaching business, evaluating Kajabi as whether or not that was maybe where I wanted to host my courses. And Kajabi has an enormously impressive array of services. They can handle your email, you can host your website there, you can host your courses there, you can have a podcast come out of Kajabi. And it was really attractive to look at all that. And then I had a little like, wait a second, I'm already paying for email somewhere else. I'm already paying for a website somewhere else. And I really liked the providers that I was using for those 2 tools. Obviously, this is a whole different conversation if you didn't like them. Being wooed by an all-in-one package, you get all this when you are kind of committed to staying with your other providers, well, that's not useful to you. But unless you have a practical plan to implement that feature within the next 6 months, you don't need to be paying for it for the next 6 months. So be very cautious of being upsold effectively into these all-in-one tools unless you are really at a place where 60 to 75% of them are already in your daily routine. Maybe not daily, your regular business routine. The third is the chasing the specialist trap. So if you have a great tool that you are using and you really love an enormous amount of the functionality that's provided, but it doesn't have this one specific thing that you really need, it can be easy to go chasing a new tool. And really what you're doing is just trying to add one functionality that your existing tool doesn't have. This one is probably one of the hardest situations to navigate because very few tools are like truly little like specialist add-on tools. And so if you're getting the new tool that has the one specific function that you need, you're often going to be asked to buy a full set of tools. But we just have to be aware of this to make sure that if we're going to switch from one to the other, the thing that we're looking for really justifies that transition. And if not, we might need to accept a little bit of waste and just go get the one tool that has the specific functionality that you need, only use that one thing and integrate it with your existing tool. But being aware when you're going and chasing after that sort of specialist functionality, that you make sure you're trying to find that price point that sort of fits the balance of the tool that you have and the thing that you're trying to add on. Make sure you don't add on just a whole secondary tool that is unnecessary. And the third trap, probably the one that most business owners are the most susceptible to, especially my new business owners, is the price trap. You are trying to obviously find the best tool that you can for the lowest price, but you get what you pay for. Getting a tool that is well integrated, well automated, and well built can save you a lot of trouble and a lot of time arguing with the behind the scenes of tech platforms. So it doesn't mean you should always be going to the more expensive tool or you should always be bumping up a level in your investment, but just paying very close attention to when something seems to be the obvious choice because it's the cheapest. What trades are you making there so you have an informed decision? Once you've gone through this part of the process, it's now time to make a decision. And the final big mistake that I see a lot of business owners make is they just spend too long. The answer is not going to get more clear if you come back to this in a month. And so if you have taken the time to write the job description, refine the job description, do your research, and now evaluate your options, the best thing to do is just make a decision and get on with it. This saves you wasting all that time in the transition period, and don't get me started on the limbo period when you're still using one tool in your day-to-day, but you're setting up your next tool for your transition. The shorter you can compress that period, the better it is for your sanity and peace of mind. But my dear business owner friend, the real reason that most business owners struggle with this is not because they didn't know any of those tips that I just gave you, but because this isn't what they're best at. Evaluating tools, implementing softwares, automations, integrations, migrations, all the shuns is a skill unto itself. In some ways, it's a specialty, and it may not be what you're best at. Someone who is in these tools has used multiple of them and is making this decision more frequently than you are is just more fluent in this. I am regularly checking in on these websites, noticing when new functionalities are popping up, or having actually lived transferring from one platform to the other and noticing which softwares make it really easy and which softwares make it not so easy. If you have already spent hours perusing the various pricing tabs for all these softwares, those 12 tabs are sitting on your browser and you haven't been making a decision for weeks, let me remind you that there are things you could be doing in your business that could be actively making the money that's going to pay for this software system the next month and the month after that. And while you are entirely capable of doing this yourself, and if you do, I hope all of those tools and references that I just gave you help you do this in the most efficient, strategic way possible. If you don't want to, the main reason why people decide to hire us to do this is so that they have somebody who is fluent in these tools, has seen the behind the scenes, and can save them the enormous amount of time that research and decision making take to ultimately come to the right decision. And then bonus points if they actually don't have to make the transition themselves, because often when we make a recommendation of a new software system, we'll also then manage the transition over, but that's a whole other topic. So if that's something that you're interested in, websites linked down below, definitely reach out. The goal is that your tools work for you without paying more than you need to, that you get back to the work that matters, whether that's serving your clients or running your business, and are not spending hours or days of your time perusing the dang pricing tabs for software companies. For those of you who made it this far, I know this is normally the point when you tune out and switch to another page. If you wouldn't mind just giving us a like and subscribe down below, it really helps new channels like mine. So I'd really appreciate it. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.